but that's still months away. Can we really wait that long? Mom's response came after an agonizingly long pause, a whisper laced with a disturbing blend of fear and dreadful knowing. What exactly are you suggesting? Something in her tone suggested she already knew the answer, but desperately needed him to articulate the horror. I'm suggesting we find a way to remove the burden. He stated his words like shards of ice piercing my very soul. Start fresh, just you and me. The casual, chilling way he uttered, remove the burden, sent a profound, bone-deep tremor through me. I wasn't just unwanted. I was being discussed with the cold detachment reserved for a piece of furniture they needed to discard. After that horrifying conversation, I kept my head bowed, desperately trying to become even more invisible to disappear into the very fabric of our decaying home. But Maxwell's eyes, like those of a calculating predator, followed me with a disturbing patience, silently waiting for the opportune moment to strike. Maxwell officially moved in 3 months after meeting Mom, bringing only a few expensive suitcases, yet immediately claiming ownership of our entire tiny space. Within days, he ruthlessly rearranged the living room, tossing out the worn but incredibly comfortable sofa, where Dad and I used to read together, replacing it with a sleek, cold leather monstrosity that stuck uncomfortably to my legs in the humid summer and remained perpetually ice-cold in the bitter winter. This place needs a man's touch, he declared, his voice booming with self-importance, as if our humble home had been patiently awaiting his divine intervention. My bedroom, once the second largest in our small trailer, became his home office within a week. Emma won't mind moving into the storage room, he informed Mom, not even bothering to phrase it as a question. Teenagers need less space anyway, builds character. The storage room measured barely 8 by 6 feet, a claustrophobic box with no window and a door that refused to close properly. I returned from school one day to find my meager belongings piled haphazardly in the corner of this glorified closet. Some cherished photos of Dad were mysteriously missing. When I tearfully asked about them, Mom simply looked away, her gaze avoiding mine. Maxwell thought it would be healthier if we didn't dwell on the past so much. The rules, rigid and arbitrary, materialized out of nowhere, applying exclusively to me showers, limited to 5 minutes. No food outside of designated mealtimes, no friends allowed over, no phone after 8:00 p.m., and absolutely no using the living room when Maxwell was home. Mom disturbingly enforced them with increasing strictness, as if proving her unwavering loyalty to him through her cruel treatment of me. Maxwell took ruthless control of every aspect of our lives, especially our already precarious finances. My small earnings from babysitting jobs vanished into a college fund, for which I never saw any documentation. Mom, under his sway, meekly surrendered her entire paycheck to him for improper budgeting. When I desperately needed money for a school field trip, Maxwell forced me to list my contributions to the household, to justify the expense, ultimately deciding I hadn't earned at it. Mom's complete transformation under Maxwell's corrosive influence frightened me more profoundly than his own overt cruelty. She began echoing his criticisms, sometimes word for word. "You're so ungrateful, Emma," became her daily chilling refrain. After everything I've sacrificed for you, she'd rewrite history during her increasingly frequent tirades, claiming I'd been a difficult baby, a troublesome child, the sole reason for her abandoned dreams. When I heartbroken reminded her of how close we'd once been, she'd accuse me of manipulation. "Stop trying to make me feel guilty. You always twist things." Food became another sinister control mechanism. Maxwell would serve dinner, portioning Mom a generous plate, while giving me barely enough to quiet my agonizing stomach growls. If I dared to reach for seconds, Mom would snap, "Always thinking about yourself, aren't you?" Maxwell works hard to provide this meal. Some nights, I'd find the refrigerator locked with a brand new padlock, Maxwell smugly claiming it was to prevent midnight snacking that would ruin your figure. I plummeted 15 pounds in just 2 months. One evening, after discovering my school art project crumpled and discarded in the trash because it had cluttered the kitchen table, I attempted one last desperate appeal to the mother I so desperately remembered. I waited until Maxwell left for a supposed business meeting, then sat carefully beside Mom on the worn couch. "Can we talk, just us?" I asked, keeping my voice soft, non-confrontational, and laced with a desperate hope. Her eyes darted nervously toward the door, as if Maxwell might burst in at any moment, but she nodded slightly. "Mom," I began, my voice trembling with suppressed emotion. "Do you remember after Dad died how you said we'd always have each other? What happened to us?" I reached tentatively for her hand, but she recoiled sharply. "That was before I realized what a selfish person you are." She responded, her words slightly slurred from the 2 glasses of wine she'd already consumed. "I've given you everything and you just want more." I tried again, tears stinging my eyes. "Remember when we used to make Sunday pancakes? Or when you helped me build that science project in 5th grade? You were so proud when I won." For just a fleeting moment, something flickered in her eyes, a ghostly echo of the mother I had irrevocably lost. But then the front door creaked open, and Maxwell swaggered in. Whatever fragile warmth might have been rekindling froze instantly, replaced by a glacial indifference. "What's this?" he demanded, his gaze sweeping suspiciously between us. "Emma was just complaining again," Mom said quickly, her loyalty to him overriding any maternal instinct she might have possessed. Manipulating as usual, Maxwell's hand landed heavily on my shoulder, a suffocating weight. "Your mother deserves happiness after everything she's been through with you. If you can't contribute positively to this household, maybe it's time to consider other arrangements." The threat hung in the oppressive air, undefined yet terrifyingly palpable. I pulled away, retreating to my cramped closet room, my body trembling uncontrollably. A glimmer of hope. Throughout these increasingly tense and suffocating months, I had occasionally noticed our elderly neighbor, Mr. Harrison, watching our house from his front porch. A retired journalist in his 70s, he lived alone in a small but meticulously maintained house directly across the street. Maxwell, with typical disdain, contemptuously referred to him as the nosy old man, explicitly instructing me never to speak with him. Naturally, this only intensified my curiosity. Occasionally, when retrieving the mail, I'd catch Mr. Harrison's eye, and he'd offer a small, reassuring nod of acknowledgement. One day, when Maxwell and Mom were out, Mr. Harrison approached me as I sat on our crumbling steps, photographing a delicate spiderweb. "That's quite an eye you have," he commented, gesturing toward my camera. He seemed careful to maintain a respectful distance, his hands visible in the pockets of his cardigan. Photojournalists learn to notice details others miss. I lowered the camera, uncertain how to respond to this unexpected yet strangely comforting conversation. "Thanks," I mumbled. "It was my dad's." Mr. Harrison nodded, his eyes kind, but subtly evaluating. After a moment of pregnant silence, he asked simply, "Are you okay, Emma?" The directness of the question, so unexpected, caught me completely off guard. Before I could formulate a safe, evasive answer, Maxwell's black SUV rounded the corner, and I quickly stood up, a surge of adrenaline coursing through me. "I have to go," I said, hurrying inside. But the question lingered, a fragile seed of hope. Someone finally was seeing what was happening behind our firmly closed doors. The first terrifying hint of Maxwell's true sinister plan came on a Tuesday afternoon in early October. I'd come home early after a chemistry lab was canceled, moving quietly through the house out of sheer habit. Their voices, intense and hushed, drifted from the bedroom. "The camping trip is perfect," Maxwell was saying, his voice chillingly calm. "Remote enough that no one will ask questions. We go in as 3, come out as 2. Simple." The casual, horrifying way he outlined whatever unspeakable act he was proposing sent a profound chill through my very bones. I crept closer to the partially open door, my heart pounding in my chest. "But what if someone sees us at the trailhead?" Mom asked, her voice betraying a nervous hesitation rather than genuine opposition. "What if she tells someone where we're going?" Maxwell's laugh was soft, confident, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Who would she tell? She has no friends and will pick a spot where the Rangers don't regularly patrol. Trust me, Sarah, I've thought this through. By the time anyone realizes the problem is gone, we'll be established somewhere new. The inheritance from your parents' house will set us up nicely." My grandparents' house had been left to Mom in trust for both of us, and Maxwell had been relentlessly pressuring her to sell it for months. "Won't people look for her?" Mom asked, still a flicker of apprehension in her voice. "A 17-year-old girl." "Runaways happen all the time," Maxwell replied dismissively, his tone dripping with contempt. "Especially troubled ones from broken homes. We'll report her missing after a suitable delay. Play the devastated parents. Then, after an appropriate mourning period, we move on, free of the burden." I backed away silently, my mind racing in a whirlwind of terror. They were planning something during a camping trip. Something that ended with me gone, vanished, and them using my grandparents' inheritance for their own selfish gain. The casual, abhorrent reference to the burden left little doubt about whom they meant. Panic, cold and sharp, rose in my throat, but I forced it down. I needed to think strategically to act. The school counselor would have been my first choice for help, but Ms. Kim was on maternity leave. Going to the police seemed logical, but with what evidence a partially overheard conversation? In our small town, where Maxwell had already painstakingly cultivated an image as a successful businessman dating the poor widow, my word against theirs would inevitably get nowhere. I spent that night meticulously creating contingency plans. I emptied my school backpack and refilled it with essentials. A spare sweatshirt, my tattered copy of the Wilderness Survival Guide Dad had given me years ago, a small first aid kit I'd painstakingly assembled from dollar store supplies, and the $43 I'd carefully hidden inside my pillowcase. I even found Mom's old phone in a drawer no longer active for calls, but with a working camera and half its battery life remaining. The next morning, I wrote a detailed note to Chloe explaining my chilling suspicions and the overheard conversation, sealing it in an envelope with explicit instructions to open it only if I didn't contact her by Friday. I casually mentioned during lunch that we were going camping, making sure others overheard. Small precautions, probably insufficient, but better than nothing at all. On Thursday evening, Maxwell announced the surprise camping trip with an exaggerated, nauseating enthusiasm. "Thought we could use some family bonding time," he said, his smile never quite reaching his cold, calculating eyes. "Just the three of us getting back to nature." Mom nodded along her gaze, desperately avoiding mine. "It'll be fun," she added weakly, "like a fresh start." The double meaning in her words wasn't lost on me. I pretended excitement, peppering them with questions about where we were going and what we would do, memorizing every detail they provided and noting what they deliberately avoided answering. The wilderness beckons. The drive the next day took us far outside our usual range, deep into the northern Michigan wilderness. Maxwell chose a winding, deliberately confusing route. Eventually, he parked at an unmarked clearing that barely qualified as a trailhead. No registration box, no trail map, no other vehicles in sight. The isolation was clearly chillingly intentional. "Perfect spot," Maxwell announced, surveying the dense forest with a disturbing satisfaction. "Very peaceful." Mom emerged from the car, her arms wrapped tightly around herself despite the warm September afternoon. She carried a small backpack that couldn't possibly contain enough supplies for actual camping. Maxwell shouldered a larger pack and handed me a surprisingly heavy one that I instantly recognized as containing our tent and cooking equipment. "You can manage this, right?" he asked, a subtle sneer on his lips. "You're always talking about being independent." The implication was clear. I was being set up to carry most of their equipment into the woods, equipment they had no intention of using. As we hiked deeper into the forest, I mentally mapped our route using Mom's phone camera to discreetly photograph distinctive trees, unusual rock formations, and faint trail markers whenever possible. Maxwell led us increasingly away from the main trail, following barely discernible game paths, and eventually no path at all. The further we went, the more animated he became, pointing out birds and plants with the unsettling enthusiasm of a man whose sinister plans were meticulously falling into place. Mom grew quieter with each agonizing step, jumping nervously at every snapping twig. By late afternoon, we had hiked nearly 7 miles by my estimation, far from any marked trail in terrain that all looked frustratingly, terrifyingly similar to my untrained eye. My growing sense of dread felt like a physical weight heavier than the pack digging relentlessly into my shoulders. I tried desperately to memorize landmarks to leave subtle, almost imperceptible signs of our passage that wouldn't be noticed by them, but might help me later. The sun was beginning its inexorable descent when Maxwell finally stopped in a small, ominous clearing. "This looks like a good spot to make camp," he announced, dropping his pack and stretching elaborately. "Sarah, why don't you and Emma start setting up while I go back to get the cooler I left in the car?" Mom nodded mutely, her eyes still avoiding mine. We both knew with a sickening certainty there was no forgotten cooler. "It's getting dark soon," I pointed out, trying desperately to keep my voice steady to betray no hint of the burgeoning terror within me. "Shouldn't we all stick together?" Maxwell's smile tightened, a cruel, predatory glint in his eyes. "Afraid of the big bad woods, Emma? Don't worry, I won't be long. You two have some quality time together." With that chilling parting comment, he set off back the way we'd come, moving with surprising speed for someone supposedly planning to return. As his footsteps faded into the deepening silence, Mom and I stood motionless. She still wouldn't look at me, instead, busying herself with trivial tasks, untying her shoelaces, retying them, adjusting her jacket, anything to avoid conversation, to avoid the horrifying truth that hung heavy in the air between us. "He's not coming back, is he?" I finally asked, my voice a fragile whisper. The sound of my voice seemed to shatter whatever remaining restraint held her together. Mom's face, as Maxwell's footsteps faded into the vast, indifferent silence of the forest, transformed. The nervous hesitation hardened into something cold, something utterly unfamiliar. Something devoid of any human warmth. "You always were too smart for your own good," she said, her voice stripped of any maternal affection. "Too observant, too questioning, too everything." She began to pace the clearing like a caged animal, gesturing wildly, her words a torrent of bitter resentment. "Do you have any idea what it's been like raising you alone, the sacrifices I've made, the opportunities I've lost?" Each question felt like a physical blow, a fresh wound inflicted upon my already raw heart. "I tried my best," I whispered, tears welling in my eyes, but she wasn't interested in my response and my pain. "Your best was never enough. Do you think I wanted this life trapped in that pathetic trailer, working double shifts serving greasy food to people who looked down on me? Your father left me with nothing but debt. And you?" Her revision of history so utterly false stunned me. Dad had in fact left a modest insurance policy that had kept us afloat for years until her drinking gradually, tragically drained it all away. Maxwell is my chance at happiness, she continued, her voice rising in a desperate crescendo. At a real life, and all you do is get in the way with your judgmental looks and your need. She suddenly kicked at my backpack, sending it tumbling toward the edge of the clearing. I lunged for it, but she blocked my path, her eyes gleaming with a terrifying resolve. Mom, please, I begged, abandoning any pretense of courage, any shred of dignity. Whatever Maxwell told you, whatever he promised, it's not worth this. He's using you. Her laugh was brittle and sharp, devoid of any genuine mirth. Using me, Maxwell sees my potential. He's the only one who's ever believed in me as a woman, not just somebody's mother. She spat the last word like it tasted bitter poisonous. What are you going to do, I asked, fear finally overwhelming my ability to think clearly, to formulate a coherent thought. Just leave me here miles from anywhere, I'll die, Mom. Something, a fleeting, almost imperceptible flicker appeared in her eyes. Perhaps the last remnant of maternal instinct. But it was quickly replaced by a hardened, chilling resolve. You're 17, not 7. You've got legs. You've got a brain. Always reminding me how smart you are. Figure it out. She snatched my backpack, unzipping it with a brutal yank and dumping its contents onto the dirt. But not with these. She kicked aside my carefully packed supplies, then, with a chilling nonchalance, pocketed the cash I'd hidden inside the guidebook. Maybe this will teach you some real independence, since you're so keen on judging how I live my life. I lunged forward, desperation overriding my fear, a primal instinct for survival kicking in. Mom, don't do this. Please, I'm your daughter. I reached for her arm, and what happened next will forever be burned into my memory, a searing brand of betrayal. She slapped me open-palmed with full brutal force, sending me sprawling onto the cold, unforgiving forest floor. You're nothing but a burden, she shrieked, her voice echoing through the silent, indifferent trees, a grotesque symphony of abandonment. You've always been a burden, and I'm done carrying you. I touched my stinging cheek, tasting the metallic tang of blood where my teeth had cut the inside of my mouth. Mom! I tried one last time, my voice breaking, dissolving into a ragged sob. Don't call me that, she snapped, gathering my scattered supplies into her arms, her movements swift and deliberate. As far as I'm concerned, I don't have a daughter anymore. She backed away, still facing me, as if I might in my shattered state attack her. Maxwell and I deserve happiness. We deserve freedom from your constant neediness. If you're smart enough to find your way out, good for you. If not, she shrugged, the gesture so casual, so utterly devoid of emotion, it seemed impossible coming from the woman who had once meticulously checked under my bed for monsters. Nature takes its course. My vision blurred with hot, angry tears as I watched her turn and walk away, following the vague path Maxwell had taken. You can't do this, I screamed after her, scrambling to my feet, my voice raw with desperation. I'll tell everyone what you did. She didn't even turn around, just called back over her shoulder, her voice chillingly devoid of remorse. Who would believe you? I ran after her, stumbling, but she moved with determined speed, and within minutes, I lost sight of her among the increasingly shadowy trees. Panic, cold and suffocating, rose in my chest as the enormity of what had just happened slammed into me. My own mother, the woman who birthed me, had abandoned me miles from civilization, with no supplies, in an unfamiliar wilderness as night descended. I stood frozen, my mind unable to fully process the profound, unfathomable betrayal. The forest around me, which had seemed merely intimidating during our hike, now felt actively malevolent, teeming with unseen threats. Every sound, from the distant calls of birds to the rustling of unseen leaves, registered as a potential danger. The clearing, which had moments ago seemed open and vast, now felt exposed, vulnerable. The crushing reality of my situation descended like a physical weight. I was utterly alone in the woods, with no food, no water, no shelter, and no clear path back to civilization. The sun was already touching the very tops of the tallest trees, which meant I had perhaps an hour of decent light left. After that, I'd be navigating in suffocating darkness. I sank to my knees, a guttural sob tearing from my throat. Then another, until I was wailing without restraint, the sound primitive and raw, echoing through the silent forest. No one was there to hear, to judge, to comfort. I cried until my throat ached, and my eyes burned, emptying years of accumulated grief, neglect, and profound rejection, when the tears finally subsided, leaving me utterly drained. I noticed how much darker the forest had become while I'd been lost in the abyss of despair. The temperature was dropping noticeably. I needed to move, to think, to survive. But beneath my terror and heartbreak, another subtle sensation gradually registered, the distinct feeling of being watched. Not by an animal, but by human eyes. I scanned the darkening tree line, seeing nothing but shifting shadows and dense foliage. Yet the feeling persisted, raising the fine hairs on my arms. Hello, I called out, my voice hoarse from crying. Is someone there? only the myriad sounds of the forest answered me. Still, the sensation lingered, not threatening, but strangely observant. And bizarrely, it provided a small, unexpected comfort in that moment of absolute crushing abandonment. Someone or something was witnessing what had happened to me. I wasn't completely alone in my suffering. A desperate fight for survival. The first night alone in the unforgiving woods taught me that fear, like the forest itself, comes in treacherous waves. Initially blind, unreasoning panic made it impossible to think beyond the next ragged breath. Then came a more strategic terror, where my mind raced through every conceivable worst-case scenario, each more horrific than the last hypothermia predator's starvation, or simply never being found. Finally, merciful exhaustion set in a dull, aching acceptance that I needed to act to fight despite my overwhelming fear. With the last vestiges of fading light, I desperately gathered fallen branches to create a makeshift shelter against the sturdy base of a large oak tree. Dad's voice, a cherished echo from our camping trips years ago, resonated in my memory. Always look up before you settle in, Emma. Dead branches can fall. I meticulously checked for widowmakers, hanging precariously above, then huddled beneath my pitiful lean-to as the inky darkness swallowed the entire forest. The night sounds surrounded me, mysterious rustlings, the occasional distant howls that sent fresh pulses of adrenaline through my exhausted body. I hadn't eaten since breakfast, and thirst scraped my throat raw. Sleep came in fitful, terrifying bursts, interrupted by every snap of a twig or gust of wind. At one point, I pulled out Mom's old phone, desperately hoping for a miracle signal, but found only my own terrified reflection in the black screen. I used its faint flashlight sparingly, knowing the battery wouldn't last long. During one wakeful period, I remembered Dad teaching me to find north using the stars. Looking up through the sparse gaps in the canopy, I located the Big Dipper and followed its edge to Polaris. Our hike had generally moved northeast from the car, so heading southwest might lead back to civilization. This small, precious piece of knowledge became my lifeline, something concrete, something real to cling to amid the chaos and despair. Dawn arrived with an unexpected, almost blinding clarity, both literal and mental. The ethereal light filtering through the morning mist transformed the threatening darkness into something almost beautiful, almost magical. My situation remained dire, but the suffocating panic had receded, replaced by a survivor's cold pragmatism. First priority, water. Moving stiffly from the biting cold and poor sleep, I began walking downhill, knowing instinctively that water always flows to the lowest point. After 20 minutes of careful navigation, slipping and sliding on the damp earth, I found a small stream, its clear water gurgling musically over smooth stones. I hesitated, knowing untreated water carried risks, but dehydration was the more immediate, more pressing threat. The water tasted of earth and minerals, shockingly cold against my cracked, parched lips. Once my thirst was somewhat satisfied, my mind began working more efficiently, more clearly. I took stock of what remained after Mom's callous theft of my supplies. I still wore my jeans, my sturdy hiking boots, and a light jacket. Mom's old phone was tucked safely in my pocket. While examining my jacket, a surge of disbelief and then overwhelming relief washed over me. I discovered a forgotten energy bar in the inside pocket, miraculously overlooked during Mom's hasty search. This small treasure nearly brought me to tears again, but I forced myself to think strategically, half now for immediate energy, the other half saved for later. As the sun climbed higher, casting dappled light through the canopy, I used Mom's phone to meticulously document my surroundings, taking photos of distinctive landmarks and checking the position of the sun. Without a functioning GPS, these images might help me maintain my bearings, a visual breadcrumb trail in the vast wilderness. While photographing a peculiar lightning-struck tree, I noticed something red in the distance, too bright and regular to be natural. Moving closer, my heart leaped with a desperate hope. A trail marker faded but unmistakable. The discovery sent a surge of adrenaline, of pure, unadulterated hope through me. Where there were marked trails, there might be hikers, rangers, or at the very least a clear path leading back to civilization. The trail was overgrown, clearly not heavily trafficked, but it was unquestionably human-made. I chose a direction based on my rudimentary celestial navigation from the night before, and began walking one faltering step after another. The journey quickly proved more challenging than anticipated. The trail frequently disappeared into dense underbrush, forcing arduous detours that consumed precious energy. My boots, designed for day hikes rather than wilderness survival, raised blisters that burned with every agonizing step. By midday, I'd finished my precious energy bar and again resorted to drinking stream water when crossing another small creek. The forest, initially so threatening, gradually began to reveal its begrudging gifts. Wild blackberries growing in a sun-dappled clearing provided unexpected nourishment, their tartness an explosive burst on my tongue. Hours of relentless walking had taken their toll by late afternoon. My legs trembled with profound fatigue, and the emotional weight of abandonment pressed heavily alongside the physical exhaustion. I'd twisted my ankle slightly navigating a rocky section, not seriously injured, but enough to slow my already laborious progress to a painful crawl. It was during a brief rest break leaning against a moss-covered fallen log that I again sensed that peculiar unsettling feeling of being observed. Unlike the previous night, when fear might have manufactured the sensation, this time I was certain. There was something about the quality of the silence, a subtle, almost imperceptible disturbance in the natural rhythm of forest sounds. "I know someone's there," I called out, surprising myself with the unexpected steadiness of my voice. "I'm not afraid of you." A moment of absolute profound stillness followed. Then a branch cracked deliberately, as if someone wanted me to locate the sound. I turned toward it, squinting into the dappled forest light. A figure emerged slowly from behind a large pine, his hands raised in a universal gesture of peace. It was an older man with white hair and weathered features, dressed in practical hiking gear, carrying a professional-looking camera with a long lens. Recognition dawned a wave of relief washing over me as he stepped fully into view. "Mr. Harrison," I gasped, disbelief warring with a desperate hope. My elderly neighbor nodded, approaching cautiously as if worried about frightening me further. "Hello, Emma. I'm glad I found you." Questions tumbled through my mind, too numerous, too overwhelming to articulate. How was he here? Why was he here? How had he found me? He seemed to read my confusion, my unspoken queries. "I've been following since you left yesterday," he explained, lowering his hands and slowly removing his backpack. "I've documented everything." He gestured toward his camera, a grim resolve etched on his face. "Your mother's abandonment, Maxwell leading you out here, all of it." The reality of what he was saying gradually mercifully penetrated my exhaustion. "You saw them leave me?" I whispered the words, barely audible. Mr. Harrison nodded grimly, unzipping his pack and removing a water bottle, which he cautiously offered. "I've been watching your house for weeks. Something about Maxwell set off every alarm bell from my reporting days. When I saw them loading camping gear the way they were acting, it just didn't feel right." I accepted the water, drinking deeply gratefully before daring to ask the question that weighed heaviest on my heart. "Why didn't you stop them or call someone?" His expression showed profound regret, mixed with grim determination. "Because suspicion isn't proof, Emma. I needed irrefutable evidence, something no one could dismiss or explain away." He pulled out a high-powered telephoto lens from his bag. "I've been documenting domestic situations long enough to know how these things work. Without irrefutable evidence, it's just your word against theirs, and adults usually win that contest." He then offered me trail mix and a sandwich from his pack, which I devoured with an almost feral hunger, while he continued explaining. I couldn't intervene immediately without risking them changing plans or covering their tracks. So I followed, keeping my distance, gathering evidence. I have photos of Maxwell leading you out here, leaving separately, your mother taking your supplies. Her everything. It should have been disturbing to learn I'd been secretly photographed, but in that moment, it felt like nothing less than salvation. Someone had witnessed what happened to me. Someone believed me. Someone had proof. "We're about 4 miles from a ranger station," Mr. Harrison said, checking his watch. "Can you walk that far, or should I go for help and come back?" The question, though, born of concern, awakened something fierce and determined within me, a stubborn resolve to complete this harrowing journey on my own terms. "I can walk," I said, rising unsteadily, my legs aching but my spirit rekindled. "But I have questions, so many questions." Mr. Harrison nodded, packing up his supplies. "I imagine you do, Emma, and I'll answer them all on the way. But first, let's get you somewhere safe." As we began walking, his steadying hand occasionally guiding me over difficult terrain, I realized the sensation of being watched hadn't been fear-induced paranoia at all. It had been protection arriving in the most unexpected and most profound form. For the very first time since my abandonment, I felt something beyond fear and exhaustion. I felt hope. Just as Dawn's story unfolded as we made our way toward civilization, his words measured and precise like the seasoned journalist he once was. "I spent 30 years investigating human cruelty for the Chicago Chronicle," he explained, helping me navigate a steep section of the trail. "Specialized in cases involving family abuse and neglect. Retired 5 years ago to Pinterest, thinking I was done with that darkness." His bitter laugh suggested otherwise. "Some instincts never fade. When Maxwell moved in with your mother, something about him triggered those old warning bells." Mr. Harrison described watching their household patterns change, noting my increasing isolation and Maxwell's overtly controlling behaviors. The breaking point, he explained, came last year, watching a case agonizingly similar to mine unfold. In northern Wisconsin, a stepfather convinced a mother to abandon her 14-year-old son during a hunting trip. The boy wasn't found for 6 days, nearly died. And despite my colleagues' newspaper coverage, the mother claimed the boy wandered off. Charges reduced to negligence, 6 months probation. His disgust was palpable, radiating from him like a bitter chill. I promised myself never again, not if I could help it. The ranger station appeared through the trees as sunset approached a simple, sturdy wooden structure with the promise of safety of refuge. Inside, the initial skepticism of the officers shifted dramatically when Mr. Harrison connected his camera to their computer. Photo after damning photo appeared on the screen, Maxwell leading us deep into unmarked territory. His casual, deliberate departure without the promised cooler. My mother's furious confrontation. The chilling dumping of my meager supplies. Her brutal slap captured in perfect damning clarity, her face contorted with rage. And finally, her deliberate, unforgivable abandonment. Jesus Christ, one ranger muttered, while another immediately radioed for medical assistance and police backup. You two found each other out there by pure luck, he asked, a hint of suspicion in his voice. Not luck, Mr. Harrison corrected firmly, his gaze unwavering. I followed them from the beginning, keeping just enough distance to document everything without being seen. I approached Emma only after ensuring her mother and Maxwell had truly departed. The next few hours passed in a surreal blur of medical assessments, police statements, and social services interviews. They confirmed what my body already knew: moderate dehydration, profound exhaustion, minor injuries, including the twisted ankle, and the unmistakable facial bruising from Mom's slap. Someone, a kind, faceless officer, brought me clean clothes, hot food, and endless life-giving water. Through it all, Mr. Harrison remained nearby, occasionally supplementing my fragmented account with his methodical, irrefutable documentation. A female detective with kind eyes but a no-nonsense demeanor took my full statement, meticulously recording every harrowing detail. We've located your mother and her boyfriend, she informed me after stepping out for a phone call. They reported you missing 3 hours ago, claiming you wandered off during the camping trip. They're at the main ranger station, about 20 miles from here. My laugh sounded hollow even to my own ears, a bitter, ironic sound. Convenient timing indeed. She agreed, her expression grim. We'd like you to be present when we confront them with the evidence if you feel up to it. Sometimes seeing is believing for people like them. I agreed, surprising myself with the nascent strength of my resolve. The journey to the main station took 30 minutes by police vehicle, during which I was officially placed in the temporary emergency custody of the state. Mr. Harrison followed in his own car, his irrefutable evidence now official police property. Nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the theatrical performance my mother and Maxwell had orchestrated. They sat in the station's waiting area, Mom's eyes red and puffy from what appeared to be genuine tears. Maxwell's arm protectively draped around her shoulders, a picture of feigned distress. When I walked in, flanked by officers, Mom dramatically leapt up with an Oscar-worthy cry of relief. Emma! Oh, thank God! She rushed forward as if to embrace me, only to be firmly blocked by the female detective. Maxwell remained seated, his expression shifting microscopically, almost imperceptibly, from confident calm to a flicker of uneasy weariness. Mrs. Jenkins, Mr. Thorne, the senior officer began formally, his voice cutting through the manufactured drama. We have some questions about your report of Emma going missing. Maxwell stood projecting an aura of calm authority. Of course, officer. We've been frantic. Emma wandered off yesterday while we were setting up camp. We searched for hours before hiking out to get help. He then turned to me, his face carefully arranged in a mask of concern. We were so worried, Emma. What happened? Why did you run off? Before I could respond with the fury that was building inside me, the officer continued, his voice devoid of emotion. That's interesting because we have evidence suggesting a very different series of events. At a precise nod from the detective, another officer connected Mr. Harrison's camera to a large monitor. The color drained from Maxwell's face as the first incriminating images appeared. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in a gesture of pure, unadulterated shock. What is this? Maxwell demanded, a raw desperation creeping into his voice. Who took these? Mr. Harrison stepped forward, his voice clear and resonant with the steel of a truth-teller. I did, every single one. The photos progressed in damning sequence, culminating in the crystal-clear image of Mom striking me, her face contorted with rage. The words, "You're nothing but a burden," were captured in the photo's caption, where Mr. Harrison had meticulously documented her exact statement. Mom collapsed back into her chair, the pretense of her performance utterly shattered. Maxwell's demeanor changed instantly, his cultivated charm replaced by raw, ugly aggression. You've been stalking us? That's illegal. These photos are an invasion of privacy. His desperate attempt to seize control backfired spectacularly as the detective stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. Actually, Mr. Thorne, there's no expectation of privacy in public wilderness. What is illegal is child abandonment, endangerment, and assault. She turned to another officer. Please place Mr. Thorne and Mrs. Jenkins under arrest. As they were being handcuffed, Mom finally looked at me. Truly looked at me for the first time since entering the station. No anger remained, just hollow shock, and the first faint glimmer of comprehension about the monstrous act she had committed. Maxwell continued blustering threatening lawsuits and claiming a setup until the officer read him his rights. A background check initiated moments after his arrest revealed what Mr. Harrison had long suspected Maxwell Thorne was actually Daniel Hayes, with prior complaints for financial exploitation of vulnerable women in 3 different states. He'd never been convicted, always moving on before investigations concluded. More disturbingly, 2 previous girlfriends had teenage daughters who had allegedly run away after his arrival. These chilling cases were now being reopened with a fresh, horrifying perspective. The aftermath, as Daniel Hayes was led away still protesting his innocence, the story broke. Mr. Harrison's extensive journalistic connections ensured the evidence reached a sympathetic reporter who treated the story with appropriate gravity rather than sensationalism. Local news covered it first, then regional outlets picked it up. Mr. Harrison's photographs, carefully edited to protect my privacy while still showing the brutal reality of the abandonment, became powerful, undeniable testimony. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. My English teacher, Ms. Davison, organized a collection for essential items. Chloe's family, with their boundless kindness, offered temporary housing, though state regulations required. I remain in official foster care initially. Most surprisingly, people I barely knew from school reached out with messages of support, having never realized the silent horror that was unfolding behind my closed doors. Through it all, Mr. Harrison remained a steadfast, unwavering presence, navigating media inquiries with professional skill, protecting me from exploitative coverage, while ensuring the painful, vital truth wasn't buried. "The story matters," he explained, his voice calm but firm. "But your healing matters more." For the first time in years, I felt seen, truly seen, not as a burden, but as someone worthy of protection and justice. The legal machinery once set in motion by Mr. Harrison's irrefutable evidence moved with unexpected efficiency. Mom and Daniel were arraigned separately, her charges slightly less severe than his due to what the prosecutor called evidence of coercion and manipulation. Still, she faced counts of child abandonment, reckless endangerment assault, and child abuse. Daniel's charges included all of these, plus conspiracy fraud related to his false identity and additional investigations into the chilling disappearances of other teenagers. Neither made bail, Daniel deemed a flight risk, and Mom having no resources without him. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. My English teacher, Ms. Davison, organized a collection for essential items. Chloe's family, with their boundless kindness, offered temporary housing, though state regulations required. I remain in official foster care initially. Most surprisingly, people I barely knew from school reached out with messages of support, having never realized the silent horror that was unfolding behind my closed doors. Through it all, Mr. Harrison remained a steadfast, unwavering presence, navigating media inquiries with professional skill, protecting me from exploitative coverage, while ensuring the painful, vital truth wasn't buried. "The story matters," he explained, his voice calm but firm. "But your healing matters more." For the first time in years, I felt seen, truly seen, not as a burden, but as someone worthy of protection and justice. The legal machinery once set in motion by Mr. Harrison's irrefutable evidence moved with unexpected efficiency. Mom and Daniel were arraigned separately, her charges slightly less severe than his due to what the prosecutor called evidence of coercion and manipulation. Still, she faced counts of child abandonment, reckless endangerment assault, and child abuse. Daniel's charges included all of these, plus conspiracy fraud related to his false identity, and additional investigations into the chilling disappearances of other teenagers. Neither made bail, Daniel deemed a flight risk, and Mom having no resources without him. The district attorney, a formidable woman named Ms. Rodriguez, met with me personally to explain the complex legal process. "Your testimony will be essential," she explained, her voice compassionate but firm. "But we'll minimize your trauma by recording it with a victim advocate present. You won't need to face them in court more than absolutely necessary." She studied Mr. Harrison's photographs again, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes revealed a suppressed righteous anger. "These images are compelling evidence, Emma. Without them, cases like yours often become difficult," he said, she said situations. A temporary restraining order against both Mom and Daniel provided legal reinforcement to the physical distance already maintained by their incarceration. I was placed with a foster family, the Parkers, who had extensive experience with traumatized teens. Patricia and Michael Parker created a safe, nurturing environment without pressuring me to immediately integrate into their family. "Your room is your sanctuary," Patricia explained gently, showing me a simple but comfortable space. "No one enters without permission, no exceptions." Such a basic consideration nearly brought me to tears after months of having no personal boundaries, respected no space that was truly my own. Just as I was beginning to establish a fragile routine, Mom, with a desperate stubbornness, found ways to disrupt it. Though legally prohibited from contacting me directly, she convinced a distant cousin to approach me after school one day. "Sarah's sorry," the woman said, cornering me in the parking lot, her voice wheedling. "She made a terrible mistake. She needs you to tell the truth about Daniel forcing her." Security footage of this unsettling encounter became additional evidence of witness tampering. Mom then unbelievably created a social media campaign, claiming she was the victim of an elaborate setup, that Daniel had manipulated her, and that I was confused about what had actually occurred. The inconsistency was striking, simultaneously claiming I was confused while asking me to tell the truth. Her former co-workers at the diner, however, saw right through the transparent manipulation, one posting publicly, "Sarah chose that man over her daughter for months before this happened." We all saw it. The online support for Mom quickly evaporated as community members who had witnessed our declining relationship over the years came forward with their own observations. Most damning were the text messages recovered from Daniel's phone, revealing their explicit, chilling plans for my abandonment with Mom, an active, willing participant rather than a coerced victim. The messages chillingly outlined their intention to claim I had run away, sell my grandparents' house, and relocate to Florida with the proceeds. As Mom's fabricated defense crumbled, Daniel's true predatory history emerged through diligent investigation. Financial fraud allegations surfaced from multiple states. Women came forward bravely describing identical patterns. He targeted financially insecure single mothers, isolated them from support networks, systematically drained their resources, and created increasing hostility toward their children. Most disturbing were the reopened missing persons cases. 2 teenagers previously classified as runaways were now being investigated as potential victims of foul play, with search warrants executed on properties Daniel had access to during those time periods. When Daniel realized the mounting inescapable evidence against him, he attempted to flee while being transported for a court appearance. This unsuccessful escape added further charges and eliminated any remaining possibility of leniency. His public defender withdrew, citing irreconcilable differences with the client, professional language for a defendant unwilling to accept reality. Throughout this unfolding legal drama, I grappled with a profound psychological aftermath that proved as challenging as the physical abandonment itself. Nightmares became routine, featuring endless suffocating forests where trees whispered in Mom's cruel voice. Panic attacks struck without warning, particularly in confined spaces that chillingly recalled my closet bedroom. School became a minefield of triggers, a slammed locker echoing like a snapping branch in the forest cafeteria smells, reminiscent of camping trips with Dad. Well-meaning but oblivious questions from classmates unaware of appropriate boundaries. The foster system, often criticized, provided one crucial benefit: immediate access to trauma therapy. My therapist, Dr. Eleanor Vance, specialized in adolescent abandonment issues. "Your body still believes it's in danger, Emma," she explained during our first session. "That's normal after what you experienced. We're going to help your mind and body recognize that you're safe now." Progress came in small, often agonizing increments one night without nightmares, a full meal eaten without crippling anxiety, a class period where Daniel's voice didn't echo in my thoughts. Chloe remained my most constant, unwavering support, visiting regularly at the Parkers, never pushing for details, but listening intently when I needed to share. She'd kept the note I'd written before the camping trip, now part of the evidence file, but more importantly, proof that someone had cared enough to remember me to believe me. The Parkers proved genuinely dedicated to fostering my healing. Michael, a carpentry teacher, built me a custom bookshelf for my growing photography collection, a space for my passions to flourish. Patricia, a nurse, ensured I never missed therapy appointments and advocated fiercely when school administrators seemed insensitive to my situation. Their teenage son, Mark, gave me space while offering silent solidarity through occasional shared meals or movies without any pressure for forced conversation. Their elementary-aged daughter, Sophie, approached my healing more directly, leaving small treasures outside my door. Polished stones, intricate origami animals, tiny drawings labeled, "For when you're sad." These small, ordinary gestures of kindness sometimes affected me more deeply than grand, dramatic displays of support from others. The preliminary hearings approached with increasing speed, the date looming like a physical barrier I needed to cross. Dr. Vance helped prepare me for providing testimony using exposure therapy techniques to reduce anxiety about recounting my harrowing experiences. "You'll be telling your story," she emphasized, her voice calm and reassuring, not reliving it. "There's a difference, and we'll practice until you can feel that difference." I wondered sometimes if I was strong enough for the grueling legal battle ahead. Then I would look at the growing file of evidence, Mr. Harrison's irrefutable photographs. The recovered text messages, the damning statements from community members who had witnessed Mom's tragic transformation under Daniel's corrosive influence. My story was no longer just my word against theirs. The truth had witnesses' documentation and a chorus of supporting voices. For perhaps the first time since Dad died, I wasn't fighting alone. Finding my voice. Finding my voice began unexpectedly with an anonymous blog. Dr. Vance suggested writing about my experiences might provide both emotional release and a crucial sense of agency over my narrative. I created Abandoned Not Broken, carefully omitting identifying details due to the ongoing legal proceedings, but authentically documenting my emotional journey. The first post took 3 agonizing hours to write each word painfully extracted from the tangled mess of feelings inside me. I expected perhaps a handful of readers, mostly fellow trauma survivors. Within 2 weeks, the blog had thousands of followers. Comments flooded in from others who had experienced parental abandonment, creating an unexpected, deeply validating community of healing. "I thought I was the only one whose parent chose someone else," wrote one reader. "Your words gave shape to feelings I couldn't express," shared another. This virtual chorus of understanding provided validation I hadn't realized I desperately needed. As the blog grew, I received messages from other teenagers trapped in coercively controlling households, recognizing chilling warning signs from my descriptions. 3 specifically mentioned my posts helped them seek help before their situations escalated further. The blog became more than personal therapy. It became a refuge, a lifeline for others walking similar harrowing paths. Meanwhile, the investigation into Daniel's past uncovered deeply disturbing patterns. 2 detectives from Wisconsin interviewed me about striking similarities between my abandonment and previous cases linked to him. I provided everything I could remember about his comments, behaviors, and specific phrases he used, which matched accounts from other victims with unsettling precision. "Your testimony helps establish his methodology," explained Detective Vance. "We're building a case showing this wasn't impulsive, but calculated, repeated behavior." The broader investigation led to renewed searches for Mia Rodriguez, a 15-year-old who had supposedly run away 3 years earlier after her mother began dating Daniel. The prosecutor linked me with Mia's grandmother, who had never for a single moment believed the runaway story. Our conversation, painful but profoundly necessary, revealed countless chilling parallels between our experiences. "You survived what Mia might have faced,